Hey everyone, and welcome back to my Lost Ark roster update video series, where today I'm going to be talking about Knight's Edge Souleater. This is currently probably the class that I am going to be cutting from my roster with the next release of Valkyrie, but not necessarily because I don't enjoy the playstyle, but because of how clunky the playstyle kind of is. So I'll elaborate on that in just a bit. The reason why she's been in my roster for so long is because I do enjoy the high uptime playstyle of her, and she does alright damage. It's just that with how she has ended up doing her damage in tier 4 ends up being kind of clunky, and she also requires a fair amount of investment in making her gameplay feel better in the first place, but it feels better, not necessarily good just yet. Now, the main reason as to why she feels kind of clunky to play sometimes is because of fight design. So it's not necessarily how she is designed herself, it's how she doesn't really function in most raid design. In a boss like, for example, Mordum Gate 3, Souleater feels fantastic to play, super fun, because there is that 100% uptime that you can have on the boss. But in a raid like, for example, Aegir, this class is absolutely miserable to play, which is also the reason why I am most likely going to end up dropping her when Valkyrie comes out. If Valkyrie is not as fun as I hope it would be, then I am going to keep my Souleater though, because it's not like I hate this class. She has been in my roster for a very long time now, and I can kind of work around the clunkiness, but I just want to kind of give you that disclaimer that I might not really be enjoying her as much as I used to because of how her damage cycle works, and let's talk about that right now then. So the main thing about Knight's Edge is that we are going to be using a builder spender gameplay that will then lead into a burst mode during which we get access to our two main DPS skills. However, getting into your burst mode takes quite a long time, so it works kind of like this. We're going to be building up our soul stones, as you can see right here, and when they're purple, our purple skills will also get enhanced. And when we use those purple skills, we start filling up the red gauge at the bottom. And then when our red gauge is full, that is when we go into our burst mode. Now this happens automatically. You don't get to choose, per se, when you go in. When it fills up, it's time to burst. So as you can see, we immediately go into our burst mode once it fills up, and then it starts to drain really quickly. When we're in here, our Ghost skills, which are these, the gray ones, they get cooldown reduction and enhanced damage. Are they called Ghost skills? Yes, they do. Those get enhanced damage and cooldown reduction, which is why you want to use as many of them as possible. However, the two main contributors to your damage from your burst mode are going to be your T skill, because it does bonus damage during your soul snatch, and also your Z skill, which will immediately exit you out of this mode. Now, the downside is that you kind of want to cram in too much during this mode. So I'm just going to build it up real quick again, and then I'll kind of talk about why it feels a little bit clunky to play. So the first thing is that when you're building your gauge like this, your red gauge naturally decreases over time. So I'm just going to not hit the boss for a little while. You can see that my gauge is slowly decreasing. So even though I've now used the same amount of skills, we're not going into our burst mode because I took too long to get there. So if there's any sort of downtime, you can see that it could take a little bit of extra skills before you can get in there. Now, while I'm in here, I want to use as many of my gray skills as I can, and then I want to exit it out by using my Z skill. But when I use the Z skill early, because I had a good opportunity for it, it exits you out of the burst mode. So you don't necessarily get to use all of your burst skills while you're in there, because you want to try and use your lethal spinning at least twice. Now, in the grand scheme of things, using lethal spinning twice is not really the be-all end-all, because the overall damage contribution of it, it's like your 4th or your 5th highest damage contributing skill. So it kind of doesn't really matter if you can't fit all of them in there. So it kind of doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. So it's like, sometimes it's just better to build up your gauge, and then once you're finally in there, just use your T skill, use your Z skill, and then start building again, because depending on how long the phase is going to be, if it allows you to get one extra usage of your Z skill out there, then it could just be more worth to do that instead. So it feels a little bit weird to play right now. Normally it would be something like this, where you go into your burst mode, You use your skills, and then after the second lethal spinning, you can get one more harvest in, and then use your Z skill to get out. And that's kind of like the ideal scenario, but because you can't always have 100% uptime on the bosses, that might not necessarily work out. And because of boss phasing, you might have to exit out early, or maybe a boss just phased before you even realized it, and now you can't use your Z skill because the boss is gone, and your Z skill is kind of like your biggest DPS skill. So it just feels kind of bad that you're supposed to delay your identity skill until the end of your burst mode, but then the boss might be gone by the time that you want to use it. But if you use it early, you end your burst early as well. So you can see that that is kind of where the clunk is coming in. On top of also the fact that while you're building up the gauge, if you're not doing it fast enough, you need more skills to get in there in the first place. So a lot of clunkiness to this class. But even though it is clunky, it is quite fun to play because it's a very high uptime playstyle, non-positional as well, which is something that I quite enjoy, which is why if Valkyrie is very fun, I'll end up replacing my Souleater, but if not, then I'm just gonna keep her because I do still enjoy the high uptime gameplay that she provides. So let's then talk about the build, shall we? So she is another high crit focused character with Swift as a secondary. Engravings, Curstall, Grudge, Adrenaline, Keen Blunt, and Raid Captain. Raid Captain works because this skill right here gives us a very nice movement speed buff. And of course we also have some swiftness in our build, so that is going to help with that as well. So Raid Captain, easily efficient as well. Gems, just damage and cooldown on all of our damaging skills, and then we also have a cooldown run over here on our movement skill buff, so that we can always have this up. This is also our synergy, by the way, so we're always going to be spamming that on cooldown. So that is why we want to run our gems like this. So engravings, gemmies. And then we have our skill build. So again, Lunatic Edge, this is our synergy. So these are the tripods that we use over here, running Conviction on this. Rusted Nail, this is our counter skill. These are the tripods, has Tenacity on it, so very nice. And then we're running a Poison Rune on this. Lethal Spinning, one of our DPS skills, mostly so when we're inside of our burst mode, running a Gale Wind Rune. Soul Drain, I've got the Judgment Rune on this, and then this is also going to be one of our biggest gauge generators. Harvest, another DPS skill for when we're in our burst mode. These are the tripods. Vestige, one of our main DPS skills. These are the tripods. Reaper Scythe, another main DPS skill. This one also has push immunity, so very nice to use that to tank some hits if you need to. These are the tripods. And then last but not least, the Guillotine. This is one of our highest DPS contributing skills, and these are the tripods. Then for arc passives, we're running full crit, swiftness, limit break, cooldown reduction, and then standing striker. There is a build where you can play Bloodthorn as well if you want to, but honestly this is just more fun to me because it has that higher fast-paced action gameplay that I enjoy, so that is why I am sticking with this build. For Enlightenment, full down to the bottom, 2 points into Soul Enhancement once you have it. Of course, the more points you can get into this, the better, because this is going to be boosting that identity skill damage, which it is going to be one of your biggest DPS contributors. And then the Leap 3, damage, cooldown, and then 3 points into Judgment. Now, this is another reason why Souleater might not really be a good alt, is because you kind of want to finish your Leap 3 on her before she starts to feel good, because if you don't have full cooldown here and full cooldown because of this skill or this tripod, then your T skill won't be available every time you go into your burst mode. And well, it being in there, one, will help the feeling of the gameplay, it's going to make it more fun, but two, it's also just going to make her damage that much better, because if you get to use it every time you go into your burst mode, as opposed to every other time, that's going to be a very big damage increase, considering this is either your highest DPS skill or your second highest DPS skill. So yeah, kind of important that you finish this, because otherwise she's just not really going to feel all that well. So yeah, Souleater needs quite a bit of investment for her to feel less clunky, and even then she still feels kind of clunky. So these are the arc passive notes, you can copy them if you want to, and then of course engravings and gems we went over earlier. So while Souleater is a very fun class to play, Night's Edge Souleater that is of course, there is a lot of clunkiness to her, that in non-full uptime scenario fights, which are the majority of fights in this game, she can feel a little bit bad to play. But on those fights where you do get to have full uptime, like your Guardian raids or Mordum Gate 3 for example, she feels fantastic to play. So that's why I've kind of got a lot of mixed feelings about this class. On one hand, she is fun to play, it's kind of the playstyle that I enjoy, but on the other hand, she doesn't really work that well in the majority of content that you're going to be doing in this game, mostly raid content, because of course Guardian Raid, she kind of works just fine. But in a lot of raid content, it feels like the raid content is designed against her class design, because she kind of requires full uptime for her to kind of work the way that she's intended to work, or at least that's how it feels like to me. So that's gonna do it for Souleater. If you have any more questions about it, feel free to leave them in the comments down below and I'll definitely get back to you. But for now, I want to thank you for watching and I'll see you tomorrow in the next one.